Good evening. Today, this is the Esports Professional Network panel number 7, and today we are doing our panel on esports videographers. Videography is everything that has to do with cameras, and when I say cameras, I mean video cameras. So anything that you would snap with the recording, when you hit that record button, these are the people who upload the stuff to YouTube, who make the documentaries, and today we're going to explore that topic. Last week we went over photographers and the vital role that they play. Now we're going to progress into motion picture and the vital role that they play in documenting the esports world, all the major events that happen, both big and small, that will define our industry in the future. So without further ado, we're going to bring up our guests. So today we have with us Luis Farley and Esteban Martinez. Both are working. They do freelancing, and they also work with organizations as work come and goes in the industry. And we're gonna start the questions. How y'all doing?
Hey, how are you?
Good,
Pretty good,
thanks.
pretty good.
So the first question is just a little bit get to know you all just a little bit. So the first question is, what is your field of expertise? What takes up the majority of your week, and how does that relate to esports? And if anybody at any time wants to know what the question is, you can look down at the very bottom bar and the you'll see the actual question in place. So, Lewis, please.
Um, I'm a filmmaker in esports, obviously. Most of my work is documentary, marketing, um, sort of hype videos, that kind of stuff. Um,
Come on, one more?
are we moving on to the next one?
Mm-hmm.
So for my week usually consists of editing, like most filmmakers, replying to emails, clients, chasing up payments, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Just the usual, really. Nothing too special, you know.
Okay. And how about you, Esteban?
Kind of similar lines. A lot of documentary work, especially with my recent projects. Lots of brainstorming, lots of sitting down during the week and kind of figuring out what I want to do content-wise, both for my clients' gigs and for me. Um, and a lot of Destiny, ironically. Uh, there, yeah, it's just a lot of brainstorming. Like I have a full 8-page document of like just stuff I'm working on at a time.
And these are different ideas that you want to record or shoot.
Yeah, either for myself or for clients. Right now, with what I'm doing, and I'm sure we'll get into that,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of that stuff, like planning out shoots, planning out what I want to shoot, planning out storylines. But there's always stuff kicking around in here for my personal stuff.
Gotcha. Okay. Awesome. Well, welcome to the both of you. Thank you for taking the time to do this. So the next question, really the first question of substance is, are you an esports videographer or a videographer with a career interest in esports? And that's kind of just to frame the your perspective and how you approach your job. Let's start with you, Esteban.
That's an interesting question that I've been asking myself recently a lot. I started my video stuff with gaming, going to tournaments on my own, interviewing players, doing little hype videos, and that's how I got started, and that's what I'm doing now. I think I'm leaning more towards just videographer instead of just esports videographer. Like, it's fun, it's what I do, and it pays the bills. But I always have a greater interest in more general gaming as a whole, not just esports, but the industry, the history of it, and things like that. So I might in
Okay.
the future maybe do a little less esports and more of that, but right now I would consider myself an esports videographer.
We'll definitely I want to explore with you that history
Hmm?
part that you just mentioned and how that's going to shape our industry and its documenting. So how about you, Lewis?
I'm probably the opposite, to be honest. I started out in esports as a player, so I was playing Call of Duty like 7 years ago, 8 years ago, and then I started editing videos, like my own little montages and all that kind of stuff. Um, And then eventually I bought a camera and moved away from esports, and I was doing corporate work and basically everything that wasn't related to esports. And then a few opportunities came up from people that I knew, obviously within the industry, and then that sort of snowballed. And I'm now everything I do is esports. You know, like I don't really do any work outside of esports or any corporate work. Like everything is pretty much esports now. So yeah.
So when you said that you were the opposite of Esteban, as in in us.
Oh, I've come from doing everything that's not esports to esports. I don't really want to explore outside of esports too much anymore. I'm kind of done with doing a lot of, like corporate video or
Okay.
anything that's basically not esports, So
So you went for very broad, and now you've kind of found your almost your love.
yeah, basically,
Okay.
yeah, just sort of doing anything I could to now, I turn down work if it's not esports sometimes, So yeah.
Okay. Whereas Esteban, you're still understanding what it is that you want to do and how esports fits into all that.
Pretty much.
Okay. Cool, because we'll definitely want to explore the two polar opposites and how that shapes your perspective. That's very interesting. So the next question is, how is a videographer in esports different than a traditional videographer? And we'll start first with you here, Lewis.
Um, I'd say probably the main thing here would be the style of shooting, style of editing, because I think with esports, there's a lot of free will of what you can produce, whereas obviously if you're doing corporate videos, it's kind of like you sort of stick to the one style. So I feel like probably esports filmmakers, I prefer the term, um, have a broader range of styles, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I think the other thing as well here is that esports events are all over the world. So I don't really ever work in my home country. I don't ever work in England. I always have to travel to another country to work. Whereas, say, a traditional videographer um, usually gets work where they live. Like local businesses and stuff. So I think that's probably the biggest difference. To be fair.
And is that you traveling the world? You said you don't shoot a
Mm-hmm.
lot in England. Is that
Yeah,
by choice?
there's not really events in England. There's a couple of event companies like Gfinity who do esports stuff, Insomnia and EGL, and other than that, there's not a lot in England. So I have to outsource my work in different countries. You know.
So
So
it's really by necessity, then.
yeah,
Okay.
essentially, if I want to work in esports, I have to travel. That's the bottom line with it.
How about you, Esteban?
It's interesting. I want to agree with Lewis in the fact that you have a little bit more freedom. Actually, have a lot more freedom to kind of dictate your own style and kind of put a lot more of yourself into esports work than you would with like client work. Like I've done them both, where like I've had to do like a client like or like an office, not client, an office like here's our office and here's our staff, and it's very by the numbers. Whereas with most of the work that I do, I get dropped to a location and the guys go at it, and just come back with something by next week, and I just go do it. And to have that kind of freedom is something you usually don't get anywhere else. It's tough, at least in the section of esports that I work predominantly with fighting games. Um, it's tough. There's not big budgets. You got to cut a lot of corners and kind of get creative with a lot of stuff. So we work with what we have, but it's infinitely more rewarding than any other video work I've ever done with anyone else. In my very short career, I will say that. Like I haven't been in this for very long, so I have to preface with that. But it's been so great.
When you say cut corners and get creative, what do you mean by that?
So like a lot of the stuff until recently, a lot of the stuff has been like we have such and such budget, and it's not anything crazy. Like I'm not going to run out and get cameras and anything like that. It's kind of more like we can pay you, you have your own equipment, go out there, do what you do. And at least that's my experience. I don't know if if that's much different anywhere else, but with me it's been a lot of like I use a lot of the same equipment I've been using since I started with, and it's kind of just like, all right, I have these 3 lenses, this camera body. Um, this is all I've got, so let's go make something happen.
Okay.
So maybe not necessarily cutting corners, but just maximizing the equipment that I bought as a hobby to be my professional gear.
So it's efficiency to the max for you.
Yes.
Got it. Lewis, uh, is that the same? Do you experience the sort of the same thing where you are?
As in budgets.
Yes.
Um, in some, not really. Like I guess in the UK esports scene, there's not a lot of money and people don't get paid as much as international events. But with a lot of the work I do, I think I don't want to sound like an idiot here, but I think I'm at the point where my work is very well paid and I don't have to say cut corners or whatever, like
Okay.
I think it's quite different. Like I'm not sure you do fighting games, right? Like is it Street Fighter or Smash?
I did Tekken actually for this. That's the
Okay.
most thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess like I don't really know. You've got like a lot of small events, right? Like a lot of local events, but you
Yeah.
don't really have.
So outside of Tekken, like Tekken's a very different thing. Tekken is a lot more, the budget's a lot better, and stuff like that. But with like not necessarily Street Fighter, but a lot of the stuff that I was doing on my own, in terms of like going out to events and kind of how I started and making a name for myself was very super grassroots. Like the FGC is a very grassroots community. They tend to like not reward, but they tend to take notice of people who start from like the bottom and make their way to the top. So a lot of the early events was just running around with like a 50mm kit lens or nifty 50 and stuff like that, and a T2i, and just doing interviews and not having the greatest light or not having the greatest mics, and then building that equipment up my own. And then people like Capcom and Bandai took notice, thankfully to friends of friends, and I still use some of that equipment and stuff like that, but it was through that kind of like, oh, he knows how to make things work with like the basic equipment, and he knows how to make it shine. We can trust him with that.
So you can be trusted with a $25 camera. Okay, so we'll give you a $2,500 camera, or $25,000 camera.
Yeah, I've never touched a 25. Well, maybe once. But I've never really touched those cameras before. But if they gave it to me, it's not like I'd look at it like the obelisk from like 2001: A Space Odyssey.
So Lewis, you're at the point now where you feel comfortable working. Well, not just comfortable, but you're able to work with more higher end material and equipment.
Yeah, I guess so. Like, there's people out there obviously far more experienced than me in that kind of thing. But yeah, I feel like a lot of the equipment I now have is, and it's way past like budget equipment. Like it's way past having
Okay.
like a beginner DSLR or whatever. But I did start out like that. I started out with a very cheap DSLR with a 50mm lens and a cheap £20 microphone from eBay. But I think with the games that I do, it's developed so quickly over the past couple of years that there's so much money being thrown around that you can quickly build up that gear. Like compared to maybe the community that you shoot in. I can't speak for what clients pay and stuff, but in your work, but it's very well paid, I guess, in say Counter-Strike, League of Legends, that kind of stuff.
So we're, I mean, I couldn't have planned this any better. So we have almost two polar opposite, not just viewpoints, but really stances. Esteban, you're more of a venturing towards the grassroots and the fighting game community. You're more of a rooted, you're a videographer with a career interest in esports as you develop your stance and what you want to do. Lewis, you're almost on the other end. You've been in other places, so you want to stay in esports, and that's your love, that's your interest. More of the I wouldn't say bigger events, but the more high profile events that might command a higher budget. Whereas you don't have to be 100% efficient. You can start talking about effectiveness and using the best pixelated camera where you get that. I don't know y'all's world enough, but like that 5% pixel difference that you may get where you might not need it, Esteban, or you might not decide that you need it as much. So that's awesome because I want to definitely explore these two perspectives perspectives, and this
Perspective.
next question for sure, which is how have you found work in the esports industry? So we start. Lewis, you answer the last one first. So Esteban, can you please start this one?
Yeah, it's been a mixture of luck, uh, my portfolio, and making friends. Especially in the FGC, a lot of the work I get, um, actually, predominantly most of the work I get is through knowing people, through networking, through meeting people who then know people who are need to do this thing or that thing, and they're like, "Well, Esteban's good with the camera. Let's hire him." Um,
He
and
shoots it in the right direction. He knows the on button, so yeah,
yeah,
let's do.
that's a start. We could give him some stuff, but yeah, it's been mostly through networking, and then at the same time, kind of making my own work. I recently did a documentary film called FGC: Rise of the Fighting Game Community.
Mhm.
That was kickstarted by me. That was planned by me. That went out, was shot and edited by me. And I just kind of was like, I've got time. Let's go do this. And since doing that, that's what really pushed me to get the current Tekken Tour gig that I'm getting now. Um, and I'm thinking about doing another film and stuff like that. So there's a mixture of networking, being in the right place at the right time, and going out there and just not not resting on your laurels and just going out there and making a project and
Mhm.
seeing it through.
And as a side note, for some of you who wanted to look at that documentary, if you look in the Google document link just below me here in my portrait, you'll see the exact name FGC Rise of the Fighting Game Community in the description link under participants section. So awesome, thank you. How about you, Lewis?
Pretty similar in a lot of senses. Most of my work was, sorry, that the work that I make is then probably shared to the right people, I guess, and it's kind of referrals from friends or past clients, networking basically. I think most people's work in esports comes through networking, so pretty similar.
Awesome. So burning question for me. The next burning question is, what does success look like for an esports videographer? Could you start for us, Lewis?
Yeah, I guess it's different for everyone. Some people it might be money. I think that's probably a lot of people. It's money and stuff, But I think for me personally, it's probably if I make something and it's talked about after it's been released, or people are happy to rewatch my work, or maybe I don't know, like there's a Reddit thread, and like people really, you can see people really enjoy your work. I think the main thing is if yeah, if people have, I don't know how to word it, but if people have it, it creates an emotion in people, like that's probably the biggest thing for me.
So it has an effect, and you can see the visible
Yeah,
influence.
that's the better way to word it. Yeah, it has an
Awesome.
effect on someone, and they talk about it afterwards, basically.
So if you were to see your post on the front page of Reddit, would you at that point say, right there, that's the checkbox that I was looking for? Is that the sort of thing?
Well, that depends if it's on the front page for the right reasons, Like
True.
if it's people,
Very
if
true.
it's controversial and people are flaming it or whatever, and that's not the thing I intended for, then
Okay.
no. But for example, we made a video with the G2 League of Legends team about 2 months ago, and the video was essentially um, the team insulting every other LCS team. And when we made this, we knew it was going to blow up on Reddit because it's super controversial, right? Like we have one of the players um, taking taking a piss on the H2K logo,
Mm-hmm.
like having but people loved it as well. Like people loved it, and to see that people like really liked something that was that far out, that was like a success to me.
Wow. So something that's not quite so controversial, but it ended up being something that was
Well, it was always going to
controversial.
be controversial, but originally we thought it was going to be complete hate. Like people were just gonna, because it is quite, some of the stuff in it, I guess, for esports was quite out there. But people loved it, and like even some of the fans of teams that were getting shit on, basically, like people loved it. So yeah,
And what
that
did
was a
you say that
success.
was called?
Uh, G2 is everywhere. It got
G2
about
is everywhere.
200,000 views, so that's another thing. Obviously, the view count was nice.
57 seconds.
Yeah, and it was basically a parody of Riot put out a video at the start of the season called EU is everywhere, and I
Ah.
basically ripped that off like a parody with our team. But yeah,
So
you get
for anyone watching in the chat here, I put the link to both Esteban's film and then now Lewis's film, G2 is everywhere. So you can look both of them up, fgcfilm.com and then the YouTube link. Awesome. So now we see what success would look like. The next thing is it difficult? And when I say difficult, I mean I guess you can interpret that however you want to there. Is it difficult to become a videographer for the big names and teams? Let's start with you, Lewis.
um, I guess it's quite an open question, but I mean, if you do good work, you put a lot of time into it, you're creative, and you're generally a nice person, and you network, and people can see that you're a nice person, then work should come to you. Like you should be able to get clients and stuff. I think it's just a case of putting in the effort over anything. Like it's not impossible to do or any harder than any other industry.
Hmm. Okay. So when you said earlier that was it difficult for you to get hooked up with the G2 folks, and then now you mentioned that you worked with budgets that were a lot larger. So the people who funded those and who chose you as their shoot, was it difficult to get to that point?
Um,
And when I
I
say
wouldn't say it was
difficult, what I
difficult.
really mean is did you constantly run into obstacles that you had to get around? Did you have to constantly badger people? That how much effort did that create to get to that point?
It was like it's hard to say, but it was a lot of effort to get to where I am now. But it wasn't as if there was obstacles. Like I put in a lot of time into my work, and I'm super passionate about the work that I do, and I consider myself super hardworking. So I think with that, it just naturally came.
Okay.
And for me, the amount of work that I put into my videos and stuff is normal. To other people, it might be a lot of work, or So to me, it wasn't like a hard task, I guess, because I really enjoy the work I do as well. So it's not like it doesn't feel like work a lot of the time.
And I absolutely understand that the job
Mm.
that I work in, I love it so much that it hardly feels like work each and every time. And as passionate, creative people that you are, that only lends credit and even more quality product as you put your heart and soul into each and every shoot that you do. So, Esteban, was it difficult and is it difficult to become a videographer for the names and teams that you work with?
Uh, it depends. Like for me, that was never my goal. Like it was kind of never my goal to kind of make this a career. This was always my goal to get better.
Okay.
Like going back to the last question, uh, like I determine success as are my skills getting better, or am I getting better behind a camera? Am I getting better with my tools?
Okay.
Can I tell a better story? Is my storytelling getting better? Because there you hit a wall where and some of this doesn't matter because you hit a wall where you can like make the most perfect structure, narrative structure. You frame all your shots right. You put it out there, and like Lewis is saying, it gets like 200 views, and then you put the camera and somebody reacting to somebody, and it gets like 200,000. Like, there's also dealing with that kind of like, well, I worked so hard in this, and then like knowing like how hard to work, how much to put yourself into a certain project or something like that is kind of a sticking point when you're doing this more and more.
Mhm.
I am just doing this is my first time really working with a big name client on this kind of level with Bandai Namco. So like it's been tough to get here, but it's been a great ride. It's been amazing. Like there's a double-edged sword when I don't think of this as work either. But I also don't like the term of like you'll never work a day in your life if you find out what you want to do,
Mhm.
because I actually think this is much harder than going to a job I don't really like, because I care about it more, and I care about it so much that like every job I do is kind of, you come out of it exhausted because you
Mhm.
put yourself so much into it. Like I just finished a small 8-minute video for the Tekken tour. I'm getting on a plane tomorrow to go to Canada to start another one, and then after that it's Pittsburgh, and after that it's San Francisco. Like, and I'm going to put as much effort into each of these videos as I do the last one. So it gets physically and mentally draining,
Mhm.
um, but it's immensely rewarding. So I think that's more the hill. That's where the difficulty really lies. Is that physical and mental part? Like the equipment, you can always rent equipment. You can always find deals on equipment and stuff like that. But having to balance that, your own expectations for yourself against the expectations of your clients or the expectations of the results you want, is kind of the most difficult part,
Mhm.
I find, for me. Uh, I hope that stayed on track. I tend to ramble
No,
sometimes. Sorry.
that's exactly what I was looking for. So it almost sounds like, even for the both of you, it's personal at that point. It's not just that you love it so much that you never work a day in your life, but along with that comes this is personal to me. I want to do a good job. Not only is my name on the line when it comes into the credits and the directed by and all that, but also just what I hold myself to when I say that this is something that I would want to watch, or that I would want other people to watch. It to me, that's the definition of it's personal to you, and that's not a bad thing. It sounds like you are invested in it, and not just physically, excuse me, mentally, emotionally, but you want to devote a good amount of time to make this something that you would want to put your name to. And that is awesome to hear from the two of you, that how much you enjoy what it is that you do. So thank you, pretty very much so. And Esteban, and you mentioned this, and Lewis, you mentioned it a little bit. The storylines, we dealt with that last week a lot with the photographers and how important storylines were to their work. I definitely want to explore that topic with you here as progress through. So I'm going to definitely carve out some time at the end, but just be thinking about that. That that's something that I think that you all can contribute a lot to, seeing as how video is a walking, talking storyline. So the next topic that we're gonna delve into here is prioritizing events. How do you prioritize the events that are available for you to attend? There are so many that occur. How do you choose that this is the one I want to go to versus this one? Esteban.
That's a tough one, especially because I just found out there are literally 3 events on one weekend
Mm-hmm.
coming in March. Uh, it really depends. Like, and sometimes it comes down to contracts. Like, if I'm contracted to be somewhere, and so client got to me first, like that's where I'm gonna go. Um, if it's a free weekend, because sometimes there's that, especially with the
Mm-hmm.
FGC, there are a lot of little events, little local grassroots events, stuff like that. Like it'll come down to, if I'm not hired for somebody, it'll be like, what kind of idea do I have? Uh, who's gonna be there? Um, what's the story going into the event, which we'll touch on later. What what can I like play with in terms of narrative structure and stuff like that, or like, can I go do some interviews? Can I go do like a small little mini movie? So it kind of comes out to be what kind of content I can make.
Mm-hmm.
But usually it comes down to, to know who's got me on contract. Like that's kind of like the big one that I've kind of run into. Like, I would love to go to PAX East, but if Final Round is on the same weekend, and if I'm working with Bandai Namco and they have a huge Tekken presence there, that's where I gotta go.
Okay.
So that's kind of I try to keep it simpler like that. But when it's a free weekend, the options are whatever I can do for me. That's when I'll go.
And then failing the contract part, if you didn't have a contract, then that running list of ideas you said, whatever might fit into that. Got it.
Yep.
Awesome. How about you, Lewis?
Yeah, mine's pretty similar. I'd say my main priority would be the content that I could produce at each of the events. Because I mean, if I could produce a video which was, I don't know, I was super passionate about, or that would be incredibly fun at a small event, like versus maybe some corporate boring video that I would do at a major event or the biggest event of the year, I'd choose the small event every time, you know.
And why is that?
Content, because I mean, doing a corporate video or a video that you don't enjoy is just like the worst. Like there isn't really much worse than shooting, editing something that you're not passionate about. You know,
Okay.
it's demotivating. So I would always choose content over everything.
Gotcha. The story that it produces and what you can cover is a whole lot more important to you than
the event itself or the prestige
maybe a
of the event.
headline
Yeah,
or whatever.
for sure.
And that
for sure.
ties back into place when you said that you want to put something out there that's going to influence in a positive way, not just these darn corporate people, blah 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 blah.
Yeah, basically.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to roll right into the next question here. How does your perspective as a videographer provide a unique view of things as they unfold during the event? So to provide just a little tiny bit of context, as an outside observer almost, you are in a position to see things that maybe the average viewer just wouldn't catch. The little reactions that you see through your camera or standing next to the players, just the things that occur that maybe someone staring at a screen wouldn't just automatically know to look for. So, Lewis, what would you say is some unique things you see as a videographer?
I think probably the main thing would be the emotions that the players have after a win or a loss, because the viewers are only going to see what's on camera on the stream. And I mean, as a videographer, you usually have access to backstage, or if you're working with a team, then you have access to their sort of like warm-up room or whatever. So I think the main thing is you get to see the emotions of the players more than anything, and what's being said, like just how they actually feel, like behind, like all the PR and that kind of stuff. You get to know them like as a real person.
Are you allowed to show that in your videos?
Well, when I work with G2, then yeah, sure, to an extent, like if players are, say, toxic and they're talking trash about another player, or I'm not saying they do, but if they do, then that's not gonna look good on the brand. So stuff like that isn't included. But there is, to an extent, there is stuff that you can put in that's maybe humorous, or it's not too bad, and that kind of stuff. You usually can put into content. And talking about that, there is a video that Team Liquid are doing at the moment, which you may have seen, called Breaking Point, and it's like a whole movie, and that's basically just like the players arguing, or it's real, it's like it's the player, it's like behind the scenes content of the players arguing and talking about what's gone wrong, which most people wouldn't put into content because the teams won't allow it. But I guess it's becoming more real now. People are putting that stuff out there.
Very nice. Thank you. How about you, Esteban?
It's kind of intense, especially with fighting games, because you're usually right there. There's the FGC is very, very intimate in terms of like how they play. Like it's very side-to-side setups. Only the head-to-head setups you see a little bit popping up more with events getting bigger and stuff like that, but still like grassroots events are very like side by side, very arcade style. So there are little interactions that you get uh, that just home audiences will never see, either because the match isn't being streamed or because they're focused on the gameplay and can't cut quick back soon enough. So a lot of the stuff that I find, or some of my best videos or some of my best moments I find, are just by paying attention to what's going on in a match, what's going on between the two players in a match. Like I have like a series of videos called Moments where that's kind of all it's focused on. There is no gameplay shown. It's just what's ever going on between the person playing or the circumstances of a match, like somebody making top 8 at Evo for the first time and they just lose their minds, like because they're so excited and so proud and stuff like that, or like $500 to $1,000 money matches in a 10, 15-year-old game of Marvel 2, and these two veterans are going at it and they're just trash talking the hell out of each other. It's stuff like that that I really like. I grew up with that. I grew up in arcades. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, so I am used to that kind of stuff.
Indeed.
So I'm glad it still happens. I'm glad it's at least in fighting games. I know that it's changing a little bit. It's getting a lot. We call it, it's getting a bit more esports and things are people are worried about. Like Lewis said, like there are brands that people they want to protect and stuff like that, which is great. And I want players to get paid, and I want everybody to kind of make this a living. But catching moments of like those old school moments of like just it's a guy's down 2 games and he just gives the shittiest look to his opponent. It's just like, oh, it's perfect. Like that's some of the great stuff that I love to capture on camera.
So the fighting game community, a very, very colorful group of people,
Oh, yeah.
and the subject of a lot of controversy over the not even just recent years, just of over a stretch of time. There have been incidences here and there that have garnered a lot of attention. So my question to you here, my follow up here is, when you see these things and you try to capture these emotions that happen, how wary are you when it comes to putting this scene in versus this scene? How much you have to edit out?
So like I haven't been privy to any moments of like extreme violence or anything like that, and that comes up. There have been a couple incidents like in past years, not so much in recent years, because a lot of people are just growing up. Like they realize like there's a lot more attention on the scene. Like Wednesday night fights used to be in a garage, now it's in the giant esports center. Like, but that only happened over 6-7 years. So a lot of this stuff is players growing up. A lot of this stuff is the scene not tolerating it, more so than they have in the past. Like it's because you can't pull that stuff anymore nowadays. Like it's
not
impossible.
with the whole world potentially watching you.
Because the consequences are severe. You've seen people get banned from the entire Capcom Pro Tour for it. Evo, my local arcade in Jersey, 8 in the Brick, has a giant physical ban list. Like there are people who've been banned from that location for 15 years, 20 years.
Wow.
But for me, I've never caught anything of like vicious, like it's always been sportsmanship. Like even like with the aforementioned like dirty look, those two guys shook hands at the end of the day, and one went home, $500 to $1,000 less in his pocket, but you lost it. You lost it in the game. If you wanted to win that money, you should have practiced more. And they both recognized that. They shook hands. They'll meet again someday. And that's where the scene has kind of been more progressive in terms of like, I'm not going to meet you in a back alley. Not to say that's ever happened. I don't know. But, it's sportsmanship. There's a better, more defined version of sportsmanship. And I'm happy to see it. And I'm happy that I can also showcase that. Because when people like, the big websites, like there's a saying in the FTC called Cold Kotaku, because Kotaku seems to always be on any slight incident or major incident in the FTC.
Kotaku is everywhere.
Yeah, so we have these other moments to also be like, hey, maybe you shouldn't always focus on like the 1 or 2 incidents every 3 or 4 years. And here's some other stuff to show, and I'm happy that I can kind of contribute to that as well.
Right, and I see that again. The link is up there. Rise of the fighting game community for your reference. So the next question here, Lewis, what are things that videographers do that most people don't either know about or you think appreciate?
Underappreciate.
Or no, that they either they don't know about or that they don't appreciate.
I guess maybe people don't know about. Well, actually, I can say this is true actually. So a lot of clients, especially once a video has been filmed or an event's been filmed, then they want the video like that, right? They want the video out the next day. So I don't think a lot of people understand how much time goes into editing and how like mentally draining an edit can be and how hard it can be. Like I think some people feel that like editing is okay, so I've got these 10 clips, I'm now going to put these 10 clips in order. Whereas in reality, editing is like a jigsaw puzzle where you have to figure out where parts go, or it's constantly changing. Like I think editing is probably the most um, underappreciated part of filmmaking for sure.
So tell me, how hard is that? I have at least a little bit background. I did some for PlanetSide 2. I did some clan games, and just trying to figure out which part fits here, which part makes sense to fit here, fitting it together, the transition properly. That alone took many hours, but I've never done anything to the extent that you two have done. So tell me, how difficult is it?
So I'm doing like a documentary at the moment from Worlds, and this is like incredible. It's one of the hardest edits I've ever done because there's so many different days to the story and different parts to the story that it's hard to make it all flow together and create a story that's up and down, or something that viewers will really enjoy and it'll engage people. I don't know how to put it into words of how hard it is to edit, but it's incredibly hard. Like it's so mentally draining that I don't know. Like when you finish an edit and you're happy with it, it's like the best feeling ever. Like it's so rewarding. And I think that shows how hard it is to get through an edit.
Is it just the massive amount of information that you have to wade through, almost like an ocean, and then you have to
Well,
go ahead?
parts. So I guess like you've got like if you're doing like a big event, you've got a lot of stuff to work with. Um, but it's just trying to figure out what's the best story or what's
Okay.
the best piece of content you can make with that footage, because it's not really often that you'll make a video and you're happy with it first time round. You might, once you've made the video, you might want to go back and switch parts around or
Mm-hmm.
remove certain clips or certain interviews, and
And
put new
Esteban's
things in
shaking his
there.
head.
And it's constantly it's a work in progress. Like you're constantly having to work on it, and it's just not something that happens overnight. And I feel that a lot of clients um don't realize that, and a lot of people don't realize that they want content out or videos out straight away, a day or two after, when sometimes that's really not possible.
Okay.
So
So Esteban, things that videographers do most people don't know about or appreciate.
Editing is definitely up there. Editing is tough. Just like Lewis said, like it's a puzzle, but it's a puzzle with no like defined edges. So like if you were to give me and Lewis the same footage and told us to make a 5 minute video, I guarantee we'd make a different 5 minute video out of the same footage just because of our different styles and stuff like that. So there's no manual guide to editing. Like there's no right way to edit like a piece. There's a wrong way, like leaving 5 seconds of black in the middle of a scene for no reason whatsoever. But there's like no right way to do it, which was a lesson I had to learn, especially with doing the film. Like looking at other films, looking at not just documentary films, but like I loved The Departed, so watching The Departed or watching other blockbuster movies, stuff like that, and
Everybody
trying to
loved The
figure
Departed.
out. Right, it's a great movie. If you didn't like it, you're wrong. But trying to find that your own voice and try to represent on camera without, copying too much from other people. It's tough. Editing is the reason why, like, it's the core reason I do video work, because I love to edit. I love to put stories together. I would also say that the days, like, I don't know, at least with the way I operate and at least the way with like my deadlines work, that I usually set for myself, but they're still like super tight deadlines. But like we'll get to an event, and it's just nonstop working. It's nonstop working. I'm working like 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. at sometimes, like especially with like something Evo will be like 6 a.m. to like 9 p.m. depending on whenever the game's finals are, and then you get 7 hours of sleep and you're right back and doing it the next day. Like it could be tough. Like it's demanding. Like people see a 5-minute video or you know even something like a minute or 30 seconds, and they'll be like, well, it's that didn't take very long. Now that you went out, you shot a couple of things and you put it together, that could have been a day or two. Like and then just shooting it and then putting it together and planning it and all that kind of stuff, and then you do all that and you come out with a 5-minute video. Depending on what you're doing, a day or two later, you're back out doing it again. So the grind is something I think a lot of people, not that they underappreciate it, but they're just not as informed with it.
We'll take note.
Yeah,
Take note.
it's can be rough, but that's why we do it. We like doing it.
I've created maybe a couple 1.5 minute videos just from a game, and that took me a whole weekend, and sometimes even longer. And I can't imagine how long a whole documentary would have taken, or the G2 is everywhere video. Just how much information you had to wade through, parse, cut up, and put together to create a story that actually said something, and it just wasn't Tourette's or going from this topic to that topic, and you just couldn't figure out where the focus was. So I definitely appreciate the effort that it takes to put something like that together, because it cannot be easy. It's not easy at all. So especially if you're watching here, and please take note that editing, it's not just Harry Potter abracadabra or what aloha mora. Awesome to know. So the next thing is, how do we support you? How does the average person support esports videographer? How about you, Esteban?
Uh, this is a question I saw on the sheet, and I was just thinking before we started. I was like, oh, I never really thought about it. For me, because my stuff is still very kind of small. It's just telling people you like my work, watching my work. If you know people who need video work, tell them, hey, I know this guy that does this. There's that. There's telling companies like it's weird because like it's strange. Like I don't know how to really answer this question, because it's kind of like I'm doing most of the legwork. I'm hitting up contacts. I'm asking people if they need to fill this kind of need or stuff like that. So the best thing I could say for fans or users or customers, whatever you want to call them, like people, like if people want to help me, like watch stuff I do. If you like it, share it with your friends. Tell everybody you know. Tell me too, because we operate in this vacuum, and it's very isolating, and we're so hyper focused on editing, or at least I'm so hyper focused on editing, that like I'm my own worst critic and reverberates all over me, and that can kind of bring you down a bit. So hearing that somebody likes my work is one awesome, if a little bit surprising for me, but like that is almost worth more than like a monetary value. Like if somebody came up to me, and it's happened to me some a couple of times, more so lately, which is really weird, but they come to me and like, oh, you're Esteban, I love your stuff, I loved your movie, I love the stuff you're doing tech and stuff like that, and
cool.
Like that is awesome. Like the fact that even one person knows who I am and what I've done is pretty cool. I can't pay my rent with that, so please share the videos elsewhere. But it helps me keep pushing forward.
Right on. Thank you. And Lewis, how does someone support you and an esports videographer in general?
I think for me, I would say give good feedback. Like it's easy for someone to online to shit on your video and say, okay, that video was shit, or I hate it because of this, or blah blah. But it's another thing for someone to give valuable feedback. Like actual constructive criticism. And I think that's something that is very valuable to a filmmaker, because it's going to help you grow. It's going to improve your work. I would put that at the top, to be honest. But not, and obviously there's the side of like sharing your work online, talking to, I don't know, talking to clients, helping you get more clients, that sort of thing. But I think giving good feedback is the biggest thing, to be honest.
Two very different answers, and absolutely both of them are very helpful. Especially for someone like me who I know that I can help some ways and retweeting and sharing stuff like that, but just the level of that you're asking for feedback and you're asking for someone to tell you that hey, you made an impact. So awesome, that's good to know. So the last topic that I wanted to hit here was storylines. Storylines in video. And we were talking about storylines last week and photography and even just for still pictures. They seem to be a very important concept to the photographers. So for you, moving, talking people, something that I could watch on YouTube. How are storylines important? And well, let's just start with that, Esteban.
So it's interesting. I think this is where Lewis and I have had like kind of like different answers to stuff, and I think this is going to be the most different based on the structure of the games we cover. Um, in terms of like for Tekken, I'm going to Canada this week to go cover one of the last like FGC stops in the Tekken tour. Um, I know some people who are going. I know the people who've already qualified to their other stops, stuff like that. So this is like one like I know going in, this is one of the last chances these guys are going to have to win a spot in a double elim tournament, because there's going to be like a last chance thing, but those are single elim and those are going to be really grueling. So that's my story going in. That's pretty much all I've got. Like, I don't know who the favorites are because most of the favorites are very qualified. I don't know who's even going to be there until I get there. And I have like 2 days really, but one really, because there's going to be one day for a possible 256 man tournament, and it's going to go down to 8 people, and I have to find out who I think those 8 people are going to win, or who else can drive the story of the 8 people who qualify and stuff like that. So it's very much I dive into the unknown, and I kind of have to figure out everything. But without that story, at least with my editing style, I don't have a video. So it's very much of kind of like a little, I don't want to say like journalism, but like you gotta kind of keep your ear to the ground and kind of be paying attention to all these matches going on around you, not just the one being focused on stream, but also ones happening on the setups. Did these two rivals play on casuals, and will they meet in the tournament? If they meet in the tournament, who's gonna, like, stuff like that. So you're constantly looking at the field for every event, or I'm constantly looking at the field of every event I go to, not knowing what I'm going to find, but I have to find it quickly. So it's tough. Where like there are events where people will qualify. Like going into San Francisco, I'm gonna know who the 20 qualified. I'm gonna know half. I'm gonna know who half of the 20 are, and then 10 people are gonna come in at a last chance event for the day. But I'll still be able to set up whatever narrative I want out of those 10 or whatever. But like going into like especially like something like this week, it's kind of just keeping your eyes open. But stories are the most important part. Like it's a soundtrack for me. I got my start editing little anime music videos, just taking clips of like Dragon Ball Z and cutting it to a Linkin Park album, because why not? It's the most stereotypical thing. That's how I started. And then, I would also take movies and do the same thing. So when I do an interview, or I, dive into these events and I start seeing storylines pop up, I'll film it, and that'll be my music track. Or I'll treat it like my music track and be like, this happened, this happened, this happened. So like, let's try to push this together, and then you add music and stuff like that, and that's how you get a finished video. So that's how I think of storylines, where they are the backbone of everything I do, to the point where like what story I'm trying to tell is connected because of the way I started videos with the music I'm using, which is why the music choice that I use is super important, because they dictate the rhythm of the story I'm trying to tell, and everything feeds back into each other, and that's how I get my final thing.
Awesome, interesting. I'll hit this. We'll come back to you here in a second, Lewis. Storylines. How do they play into the way you do things?
I mean, stories, everything, right? Like I think Esteban covered everything there, but I mean, you could have the most aesthetic clips of a player playing, the nicest looking clips, but without any context to them clips, that they mean nothing, you know. So, in short, story is king, I guess. That's the only thing to say.
So when you said earlier that one of the unique things that you get to see is the emotions from the players, and you have a lot of backstage access. Does that influence your storyline at all? Does it play a part?
Yeah, of course. I guess like if you have clips of players, um, maybe one of them's crying after a loss, then that's going to impact your story massively because you're going to have a scene where the viewers who are watching are going to really feel for the player, you know. Um, whereas if you didn't have that clip, then that scene of your film would just end with the team losing, right? And you wouldn't have that emotion afterwards, I guess. So
Okay.
yeah, it was a massive impact having things like that.
And Esteban, you mentioned a little bit earlier that you were very interested in exploring the history, and how does your storyline play? Does that play into your storyline at all?
It depends. Like, I have a couple ideas both in the FGC and outside the FGC, in terms of like history stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
that's history. Like I'm so interested in that because it's like the story has been told, or the story like it's happened. So now, how do we tell it in terms of like like do we Ken Burns it and get a lot of archival footage and play around with that? Do we travel and find players who may not be active anymore and interview them and kind of people who are there and stuff like that? So that is kind of, it's a little bit different than being in a live environment and it happening around you. It's kind of hard to explain, but like in a live environment, it's happening around you. You're making it. Like you're making the story. The story becomes not only the story that's happening, but the story you see in terms of like the story of every tournament is who won and who lost, but there might be things that you see on the floor, like the way a match goes, because like it happens in the general esports, like like a Counter-Strike Go, you'll see teams adjust strategies, stuff like that throughout the round, stuff like that. In fighting games, like rock paper scissors, if I hit you with rock and you pick scissors and I hit you with rock and you hit you with paper, that happens, but it happens multiple times in a match, 99 seconds at a time. So that's also another story that you can tell in there. So like I like fighting games, one, because I used to play them as a kid. I still play them, so it's a lot of fun to kind of put these on camera. But I like it because of the rate these narratives form, and as quickly as they form and as quickly as they change. Like you always kind of got to be on your feet and running around, because like the games are volatile, not in the terms of like they make you want to hit something, but in terms of like there's someone can always come back quickly, someone can
Mm-hmm.
always go down quickly, and if you're not ready and you're so focused on the predetermined story in your head, you're in trouble, because you got to be quicker than that. You have to be able to adjust just as fast as the players adjust.
So, Lewis, Esteban was just talking about how the fighting game community contributed and influenced his storyline. You said you covered a lot of Counter Strike, and
Yeah, quite a lot. Yeah.
so how does a community like that influence your storyline in the way that it did for Esteban?
It's hard with Counter Strike over the past couple of years, I guess, because with so many events, there's probably a Counter Strike event every single weekend of the year, and with that, it's hard to create storylines because the teams are playing each other every week, you know. So it's kind of different. You can't have like big grudge matches, but I think Counter Strike's probably a bad example, to be honest. Because there's my personal opinion on Counter Strike right now is that I don't enjoy shooting it so much because there's too many events,
Mm-hmm.
and because there's too many events, there's not enough substance to videos that you produce. You know, like there's there's just too much of it. I think
So when you
that's the
say
only way to
it's
answer it.
difficult to shoot, as in you don't see the emotion, you don't see the story in it.
Yeah, because so for example, say with um, let's say I don't know, say with Tekken, so you have two people, right? You have two players that maybe haven't played each other before, and they're both like really hyped up players, new and upcoming players, and there's loads of hype around them playing for the first time, right? You can create a really cool story out of that, and like people are really interested in it. But with Counter-Strike, so say if you have two of the best teams, say you've got G2 and I don't know, Navi, they probably play each other once or twice a month. So the stories are not there because them big games are so common that people don't really care, because they'll think, okay,
Okay,
G2 lost this time, they'll play again in a couple of weeks anyway. So there's
got it.
there's not really a huge amount with Counter Strike. It's such an oversaturated game right now that, yeah, I think it's probably the hardest esport to create good stories on a constant basis.
Wow, that I never would have guessed that
Yeah.
Counter Strike. Wow. So we went through all the questions that I wanted to explore. Thank you both very much for taking the time to do this. The last thing I wanted to leave you all and everyone else watching with is, do you have any sort of shout outs or anything that you wanted to end with? How about you, Esteban?
Uh, you know, there are a lot of people who've helped me get to where I'm at. People like, Chris Segula, Ryan Gutierrez. You had one of them on your show last week, Robert Paul.
Very yeah.
Yeah, I did. I met Rob at a Street Fighter tournament actually, where we were introduced as like, oh, he takes video, you take pictures, you guys should talk. And then I had to eliminate him from the Street Fighter tournament, so we didn't really talk that much that night. But like he's been one of the guys that like I've been working with, ever since I met him, and he's doing really cool things right now. And because of him, I've gotten some cool work and stuff like that. But we're back to back in the thick of things. So he's like one of my favorite people to work with.
Nice. That's awesome to hear. That is really, really cool to hear.
But yeah, I guess the thing that I would leave people with is one, make friends, like you just heard, like making friends, especially in whatever you do, but predominantly mostly in esports, like that helps. Like you don't have to, you don't have to pander to people, stuff like that. Just be you, and if people vibe with that, they'll vibe with it.
Right on.
Don't be a dick. That's what I can say. But there are a lot of people who look at well, not a lot, but there have been some people who've come to me and be like, oh, I wish I could do what you do, and all you have to do is start, and that's like the hardest thing to do is like to take that first step, because like it's kind of overwhelming. But if you have an idea, or like if you ever watched one of my videos and like hated it and wish it was done better, go do it better. like I don't mean that as like, well, let's see, like go do it. That's how I start everything. Like if I see something, like a lot of my editing style is like it's because I don't want to like badmouth anybody. Like I don't want to, like I hate large esports videos. I don't like it's kind of become stagnant in terms of like every week I'm seeing a new thing in slow motion with like a dance track in the background and stuff like that. It's my editing style is made to be contrary to that. It's fast. It uses a lot of hip hop. Uses a lot of instrumental tracks, stuff like that. A lot of stuff that I would vibe to. So like I saw a lot of those videos and it's like, what, I'm just gonna start doing what I wish to see in esports, and that's what I did. So if you don't like what I do and you wish to see other stuff, go do it and keep doing it and keep working at it and keep refining it, and this will happen. That's how I did it. That's how a lot of people I know have done it. Just keep your head down, keep on the grind, keep making what you want to make, and just go for it.
Word. Lewis, conclusions, shout outs, anything you'd like to leave us with?
Give a shout out to my main man, Gerald Buckfield. That's it. I'm done.
Mic drop.
Peace.
That's what that. Well, everyone watching, everyone who may watch in the future for video on demand, thank you very much for tuning in. Lewis, Esteban, really appreciate your time. Just taking some time to educate me and everyone else about what it means to be a videographer and why it's important to the esports industry. That things like FGC, Rise of the Fighting Game Community, and G2 is Everywhere. even if you didn't mean for it to be controversial or anything like that, it ended up making an impact on our industry, and people need to know why and how that's possible. More importantly, the people behind it, because you will continue to be a driving force in esports, and I thank you both for having the passion and the drive to do that. So again, thank you both for your time. Really appreciate the insight that you gave us into your field. So with that, we'll end it out here, and thank you all. Thank you all for coming.
Cheers.
Later.
Bye.
Boom.